Was sponsored by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, nurturing environmentally healthy and culturally vibrant communities in metropolitan Detroit, and supporting initiatives to restore the Great Lakes Basin. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA leads a task force of 15 federal agencies and departments to implement the President's Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And by the International Joint Commission, assessing progress, providing advice, and engaging the public under the U.S.-Canada Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement.
And welcome next week right here in Detroit. We are coming to you live from the campus of Wayne State University in Detroit. We want to welcome all of our public television stations from around the country who are carrying us right now. And we also want to welcome you who are watching us online at greatlakesnow.org. We have been discussing water quality all day long. You've also been going in and out of the sessions with the IJC and the EPA. In just a few minutes from now, we are going to be going to a town hall meeting with representatives from the IJC and the EPA. So if you have any questions at all and you're on social media, perhaps you're on Twitter, you can and please bear with me if you're not into social media, the hashtag AskGLW. So make sure you get into your questions. Also, if you want to comment to us on our broadcast so far, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook at Great Lakes Now, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Great Lakes Now as well. So now that I've gotten all the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to the two gentlemen who are with me right now. Dr. Patrick Doran is on my left here. He's the Director of Science for Michigan and the Great Lakes for the Nature Conservancy. Patrick, thanks for coming back. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Dave Ulrich is here with as well. He's the Executive Director of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christy.
So both of you, I'm going to ask, what is your first impressions of the conference so far as we've been here with Great Lakes Week? It's just kind of getting underway this afternoon. Dave, let me start with you.
Well, this has been extremely exciting. It's the first time ever when a series of several conferences are being held at the same time. And although a few logistical difficulties have been experienced, having all of the right people together in one place at the same time is an extremely important thing in terms of Great Lakes problem solving. So it's been very exciting.
And so talk to me, have you heard anything that you were surprised about, or is it basically what you expected to hear in terms of some of the issues that we're tackling right now?
No big surprises. The big things that we're dealing with now in the Great Lakes have not changed that much in terms of what they are. They morph into different types of problems over the years, but basically dealing with invasive species, dealing with nutrients, and dealing with cleanup of legacy pollutants from the past are the big things. They were identified today by Administrator Jackson of US EPA as the top three priorities to be dealt with, and these are things that we have been dealing with some time. Now, the nutrient issue is a little bit of a surprise because as much as 5 to 10 years ago we thought we had solved that, and now it's reappearing as a serious problem, particularly in Lake Erie. So that's one that is getting renewed attention now.
What were your thoughts, Patrick, on hearing that?
I think the same things. We know the problems. We know the problems. And what I think is neat about bringing all these people together is that you have people here that are here from the initiating the science and the ideas and identifying the problems all the way to the practitioners that are intending to do something about it. So a conference like this brings all those people together and gets the ideas flowing amongst one another to make sure that the scientists have the information needs, to make sure that the policy folks and the regulatory folks see the real concerns as they hit the ground. So I think that's the neat part. Again, really no surprises. I got to fly from Detroit to Philadelphia the day and flew over Western Lake Erie, and I looked out the window and I was struck, and I saw people looking out the window and they were struck. What is that green down there? Why is it like that? I was blown away. And so I think that algal issue is one that is a bit, it's really important right now. And
especially because people can see it, because I think that's also the disconnect where, excuse me, we're talking about the science of it. We have all these people in the building, but now taking it to the next level, getting it out to the public and getting them to care about it. Because when you look at the Great Lakes, many people say everything looks fine with the exception of the algae blooms in Lake Erie. But how do you get the public to care?
Well, one of the primary ways is through programs like this, because information, good information that's delivered in an understandable way is extremely important to getting more public awareness, concern, and then action. That's where our organization really tries to bring the word about the Great Lakes to the public. There's no person really in a better position than a mayor talking with his or her community, whether it's 500 people or 3 million people like Chicago or Toronto, to start talking about something as important as water quality in the Great Lakes.
So Dave, back up and tell me exactly what your organization does.
Well, we have a group of 82 cities from the United States and Canada on the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence who have banded together to have a stronger presence and voice in the protection and restoration of the Great Lakes. For a long time, it was basically federal, state, and provincial government that worked on the Great Lakes. And starting in 2003, a small group of cities under the leadership of former Mayor Daley of Chicago basically said, we've got a huge stake in this resource. We've got good ideas on how to solve these problems. We're particularly well situated to implement solutions to these problems. We deserve seats at the Great Lakes decision-making tables. So that was number one. Best practices, getting good ideas in one city and sharing them with other cities. And thirdly, bringing attention to Washington and Ottawa back to the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence, saying, we've got the largest source of fresh water in the world. You've got to be investing in this like we are as well. So getting those positions at the Great Lakes decision-making tables and implementing solutions, because the mayors are close to the resource, they're close to the people, they see their constituents every day, many times a day, and they say, why aren't the beaches open today? And the mayor calls the park district or who's ever heading up the beach activity and says, we've got to get this problem solved. So that's the value that we're really trying to bring to this decision-making and problem-solving process.
And Patrick, would you say that's part of that when people do go to their beaches and they say, it's closed again, who are the first people that they call? Their city governments or their towns to see what's going on? That maybe that is a good way to reach up, because it seems that it would be awfully difficult for me as Joe Q Public to pick up the phone and call the EPA and get some kind of answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I like about this is that you might be interested in water quality. You might be interested in beaches. I'm interested in birds. But the same
Let's all
impacts.
get along.
No, but the same impacts, the same things are affecting all of those.
Yes.
Those are different targets at the end of the stream. The same source might come from the same problem. So the solutions we implement, the actual strategies, the actions we take on the ground can help fix all of the problems for all those things we care about. And so we can communicate them a little bit better, and we can work together on some of those solutions. That's where we're going to get our efficiencies.
It strikes me as a little bit overwhelming sometimes, though, gentlemen, when you look at the amount of organizations that are working on Great Lakes restoration, whether from environmental groups or the agencies and now the mayors of the cities. Is it too much? How do we make this easier, or is that even possible?
It is possible. It is overwhelming and it is confusing, particularly because the problems are so big and so complex and so many people are involved. But as I said at the outset, one of the critical things is to get the right people together at the same place and really committed to solving the problems. So, and then figuring out who's in the best position to do it. Just to give you a good example, Patrick said how when you're solving one problem, you can solve a number of problems. With the beach closure issue, a lot of that is related to stormwater runoff. A number of our cities are using constructed wetlands, reconstructing wetlands on the beach area, which first of all creates excellent habitat for birds, catches the stormwater, cleanses it before it goes out into the lake, and you've got cleaner beaches and cleaner water there so that people can come at other parts of the beaches and use it. But you've got a 3-fer or a 4-fer in terms of the kind of results that you can get from that. And you get happy mayors, and you get people who re-elect the mayors who keep the beaches open and the birds coming.
Happy people. Yep. Patrick, what are you working on with the Nature Conservancy to be able to kind of rope all that together and work on solutions?
Well, this is, I can give you the real geeky side. I'm the scientist, right?
I like to get all nerdy here. But David, please go ahead.
I mean, David mentioned something that I think is understated, and he said something about information sharing. And he has a group of people. They can share information across all their cities, all their ideas, and there's conferences like this where we can share that information. But we need common sets of data on which we can all operate operate from. So I have a lot of staff, again, that are working on, I mentioned a project to work on mapping threats to the Great Lakes. If everybody can operate from that common data layer, we don't have a common coastal classification for all of the Great Lakes, a common language to talk about what type of habitat and what type of substrate. We don't have that right now. There are projects going on with Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA and the Nature Conservancy and University of Notre Dame to get that common classification. Again, these are all very boring things my mom does not like to really hear about or care about too much, but they provide the
Doran,
foundations.
if you're watching right now, he's talking directly to you.
But they provide the foundations for all the good conservation work and all those good actions that get done on the ground.
Well, Patrick has hit on a really critical point, and going back to your question about how can you make this manageable, understandable to people, there is such a mass of data out there about the Great Lakes that hasn't been sifted and winnowed in a way and delivered to the public in a way that they can understand it. And not to beat the beaches issue to death, but we have ununiform standards between the United States and Canada in terms of what is safe and what isn't safe for the beaches. We don't have any means of collecting the data on beach closures over the course of a summer so that we can present a unified picture, and even more importantly, so that we can measure from one year to the next. Are we making any progress on this? So Patrick has hit on an incredibly critical point.
So I'm sitting here at home listening to us have this conversation, and I say, who's in charge then? Who's in charge? Who should do that? Who should be all right, we're going to gather the data. We're going to have these standards. Did I just put my finger in a hornet's nest or what?
You did.
Yes, you did. Absolutely. It's a tough question. Who is in charge? And we all have our expertise. Work with cities. We come from a natural resource and a nature perspective. Other folks come from a regulatory perspective. It's not always clear. Again, we talked about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. EPA was in charge of that, but they were the front organization for, 15, 16 federal agencies behind them.
Yep.
And that money flowed in all different directions. So it's a tough question, and who's going to step into that role of leadership? That's not answered.
Yeah, that is a fundamental problem. And the true answer is nobody is in charge. Yeah. Nobody is truly in charge. And I'm afraid that we'll never solve that completely because, as Patrick has said, there's 16 federal agencies. We've got 8 states, each of which usually has an environmental and a natural resource agency and some others, health agencies that are involved. The provinces of Quebec and Ontario are involved as well. They have different agencies. What I really think it takes is some real political leadership, some intellectual leadership, some scientific leadership of people who are willing to step forward and say, this is a problem, we really need to tackle it, and we really need to solve it. So I don't think it's ever going to be like a new structure that will have a king of the Great Lakes or a queen of the Great Lakes, but I do think we need to figure out ways to develop and get out in front with more leadership. We do think some of our mayors and our past mayor, Mayor Daley, really did take some real leadership. Mayor Emanuel is doing some of the same related to these issues. And people will come out and really speak about what the problems are and what needs to be done, and then lead by example. That's one of the mottos that we have in our organization.
But I would add, it might be the wrong question to ask, is there somebody in charge? Another way to look at the problem is saying, like we already mentioned earlier, here's a couple focal issues. Let's focus on
How
those.
do we get there?
We have aquatic invasive species. We have nutrient problems. We have areas of concern. And so we can take something like nutrients. It's pretty much easy to agree that, I care about that, your organization cares about that, your agency cares about that. Then the question gets to be is, what is our goal? And you mentioned that earlier. Let's have a clear goal that we know benefits the natural communities, benefits beaches, and let's make sure that all of our actions, we track all of those actions, and they all add up to meeting progress towards that goal.
More of a coordinated effort.
Yep.
So that, I guess, just brings us back around to having this kind of conference and having Great Lakes Week here in Detroit, where you get all of those various entities together to say, maybe have a couple of aha moments where they say, oh, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Maybe we ought to spend a little bit more time together. Here's
an example of the importance of goals in dealing with invasive species, which have been one of the top 3 from the beginning. I believe that we should have a goal of 0 introductions of new invasive species at some point down the road, and between now and then, a reduction in the frequency of introductions of species. Then we can measure our progress and see how we're doing.
Yep.
Dave Ulrich, Patrick Doran, thank you so much for joining me. Right now, they are going to start their town hall meeting, and we invite you to join along. Make sure you follow them on Twitter, and you can ask your questions. You are watching live coverage of Great Lakes Week right here in Detroit on greatlakesnow.org.
I have camera.